Welcome back to the Explainer. Let's just jump right in, because today we are breaking down exactly how to actually build wealth in 2026. The rules of the game have fundamentally changed, and relying on outdated financial advice, well, that might just be the biggest risk you could possibly take right now. We're going to kick things off with a truly staggering number. U.S. household debt hit an incredible $18.8 trillion by the end of 2025. I mean, between ballooning credit card balances, auto loans, and student debt, we're seeing the stage perfectly set for a massive economic squeeze. For the average earner out there, the margin for error has basically vanished. And that brings us to the ultimate question we're going to explore today. How on earth do you beat the system and achieve financial independence when everyday costs are just soaring? When just keeping a roof over your head feels like a total luxury, how do you actually get ahead? Let's break down the math. Section 1. The 2026 Cost Crisis. Decoding the data. Look, according to the latest Global Cost of Living Index data from Numbeo, Zurich might take the crown as the absolute most expensive city worldwide, but American coastal cities are right on its heels. Living in these hubs demands an absolute premium just to survive, long before you can even think about saving or investing. The barrier to entry in major U.S. cities is just staggering right now. Check out these median home prices. New York City is topping $2.68 million, but San Francisco and LA both sitting well over the $1.2 million mark. When housing is eating up this much capital, that traditional path of, just save up to buy a house, it really starts to break down mathematically. Now, here's a crucial distinction we really need to understand. Cost of living index versus your actual standard of living. Just because a city pays you a salary that's, say, $10,000 higher than the national average, it doesn't automatically mean your standard of living improves. If the local cost of living index eats up all that extra cash and then some, you're actually moving backward. And because of this massive disconnect between salaries and survival costs, we're seeing a really fascinating demographic shift. Section 2. Geo-arbitrage and migration, voting with our feet. Check this out. Federal Reserve Credit Bureau data tracking migration patterns shows people are literally voting with their feet. Remote and hybrid workers are fleeing expensive, dense cities like New York, LA, and San Francisco in massive, massive numbers. Where are they heading? They're favoring way more affordable Sunbelt cities down in Texas, Florida, and Arizona, which is driving these huge net inflows to places like Dallas and Tampa. This whole migration is driven by a powerful concept called geo-arbitrage. It's this strategic move where you leverage remote work to keep a high-tier, big city salary while drastically cutting your housing and living costs by moving to a cheaper market. Honestly, it's one of the absolute fastest ways to suddenly free up thousands of dollars a month to invest. But how are the big financial gurus telling us to navigate this wild environment? Let's take an impartial look at a few different strategies. Section 3. The debt-free route, Dave Ramsey's conservative path. So Dave Ramsey's philosophy focuses heavily on behavioral change and the psychological win of just eliminating all liabilities. His famous Baby Steps program advocates for literally cutting up all your credit cards, achieving absolute zero reliance on credit, and using the debt snowball method, where you pay off debts from smallest to largest just to build that psychological momentum. For a lot of people buried under that $18.8 trillion national debt pile, this behavioral reset is absolutely life-saving. But, we really have to look at the whole picture here. When critics analyze the Ramsey SmartVestor Pro network, they point out some real mathematical headwinds. These vetted advisors can charge fees upwards of 2% and sometimes utilize expensive mutual fund shares. And crucially, they aren't legally bound to act as fiduciaries, meaning they aren't legally required to put your financial best interests above their own commissions. Over a few decades, those high fees can severely eat into your compounding returns. Now, on the completely opposite end of the spectrum from Ramsey's debt-averse strategy, we have Robert Kiyosaki. Section 4. The Asset Builder Route. Robert Kiyosaki's leverage. Kiyosaki's core thesis from Rich Dad Poor Dad is simple but profound. The rich acquire assets, while the poor and middle class acquire liabilities that they falsely think are assets, like an expensive primary home or a luxury car. He argues you should actually use leverage, meaning debt, to go out and buy cash-flowing properties and businesses. The goal here is what he famously calls minding your own business, basically taking the money from your day job and funneling it straight into an asset column. Real assets that are working for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, eventually generating enough passive income to buy your luxuries for you. But here's where we hit a bit of a snag in the modern era. The major criticism is that Kiyosaki's inspirational advice to heavily leverage assets collides dangerously with the reality of 2026, when the modern workforce is already buried in record household debt, dealing with high interest rates, and facing these super volatile housing markets. Going big on leverage real estate is incredibly dangerous for the average earner starting from zero. I mean, a single bad deal can literally lead to bankruptcy. So we're left with a real dilemma. If Ramsey's network is too conservative and potentially burdened with high hidden advisor fees, and Kiyosaki's leverage approach is way too risky for most regular folks today, what's the actionable middle ground? How do you actually get ahead? Section 5. The Modern FIRE Strategy, the Mathematical Middle Ground. Enter the modern FIRE movement. Financial independence, retire early. This strategy completely bypasses the gurus and relies strictly on cold, hard math. The crucial point here is optimizing the updated 2026 tax codes perfectly to your advantage. The FIRE arsenal says you max out that newly raised 2026 limit of $24,500 on your 401k and the $7,500 limit on your IRA. Beyond that, it requires setting up a standard taxable brokerage bridge account so you can actually survive early retirement before you're legally allowed to touch your pension or 401k at age 59 and a half. It also means managing your income super carefully to dodge things like the returning 2026 ACA healthcare subsidy clips. It is pure calculated optimization. And the actual mechanics of getting there? Beautifully simple. You avoid expensive advisors entirely by just automating your investments into low-cost index funds, essentially owning tiny pieces of the entire global stock market. You apply geo-arbitrage to turbocharge your savings rate by moving to a cheaper area, and then you just coast on compound interest until your safe withdrawal rate easily covers your annual living expenses. It's not flashy, but mathematically, it works every time. But, and this is important, to make the FIRE math work, the data shows you absolutely must adhere to defensive principles like the 28-36 rule. You must spend no more than 28% of your gross monthly income on housing. This is your #1 defense against lifestyle creep, that insidious trap that keeps even doctors and lawyers living paycheck to paycheck just because they bought too much house and too many cars as their income went up. Ultimately, whether you lean conservative with debt payoff, aggressive with asset building, or prefer the mathematical precision of the FIRE movement, financial independence in 2026 is all about building systematic mechanics rather than just working harder at your day job. You have to build a machine that works while you sleep. So, I want to leave you with this final thought to chew on. Take a hard look at your own portfolio today. Look at your monthly expenses and ask yourself this. Are you truly building an asset column, or are you just buying a more expensive liability disguised as success? Be honest with yourself, because the answer to that question might just change your life. Thanks for hanging out with me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.